Our lesson plan is based on the Middle Cold War, and more specifically John F. Kennedy and his role in the Cold War. So the first thing we're going to do is set up this sort of list of things that the students should know, like about John F. Kennedy, the space race, the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Vietnam War, and we need to be able to touch on all of those things at least once throughout class, because those are like some of the more important parts of the lesson plan. And students should be able to, by the end of the class, describe and explain the causes and the consequences of the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis, and sort of like what role Kennedy had on them, and so forth. And they also should be able to describe the effects of the Vietnam War on domestic policy, like for later on in American history. So our central question is, how did the Cold War affect both the foreign and domestic policies of the United States, especially in respect to the Soviet Union and the spread of communism? And we'll begin the class with our activating strategy, which will be to have students go up to the whiteboard and create a chart, basically. Where on the left, it's no, and on the right, it's want to know, or something you have a question about. And this way, students who know something about Kennedy or the Cold War will be able to write on the left side of the board at least one fact that they might know, basically saying like, oh, I know in the middle of the Cold War there was the space race and there was Sputnik. And then if they've heard something about the Cold War but they don't know a whole lot about it, they'll be able to write on the want to know right side of the chart. And so basically the goal of this is to have every student write down at least one thing that they know or want to know, and then we can try to cover those things and sort of get them personally involved in the lesson so that they're willing to participate. And so the key vocabulary is some of the similar things that we have up here, and the students will know. But vocabulary, John F. Kennedy, Castro, Cuban Missile Crisis, and so on. Okay, so and then we get into like the actual lesson itself. So after we do the activating plan, we will have a short lecture, which will be about 10 to 15 minutes. And that will be based upon the content outline right here. And we'll go over 8.1.1, which is about how United States policymakers engaging in Cold War, and that covers question WOR2. And it'll also cover the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis. So those are some of the main talking points for 8.1.1. And then we'll also go over 8.1.2 and the Cold War policies that led to public debates. That'll answer question NAT 3.0. And it'll also go over the New Frontier and Vietnam. And then the space race activity is part of another part of the lesson. So basically, the teacher will go through this content outline and do sort of a quick overview, like on the surface, sort of get the students to understand the overarching themes of the Middle Cold War, and then we'll have a group discussion for another 5 to 10 minutes, maybe longer, depending on how the students are participating. And that'll be have students talk to each other and talk to me, and sort of just like ask any questions they may have, and sort of go deeper into the things that they want to know about, rather than just the things that I might think is important. So for the assignment, students have to take notes during the lecture, and that will be taken up. And a completion grade will be given to students. It won't be like a graded assignment as where, like, if they don't have a certain thing, they're going to get points off. But like as long as they're participating in taking notes for the lecture, and as long as they were using those notes and discussing, they will get a completion grade. And then our second activity, which is sort of the, this is going to be the bulk of the lesson, will be students reading Kennedy's congressional speech on the 25th of May in 1961, which is generally about the space race. And then they will be able to answer the 6 questions attached. After completing the questions, students will create a thesis based on the document and prior knowledge on the attitude of Americans in regards to the space race. And this is important because it's going to be helping them build their essay writing skills, as well as being able to take information that they just read, as well as information that they might have seen on the activating strategy before and the want to know, or maybe things that we've gone over in the things that other kids asked about during the discussion or the lecture. So yeah, and so that's going to be the bulk of the class. So 40 minutes for them to sort of digest this and go more in depth into the space race, because we felt like that was one of the more important parts of the Middle Cold War, because it involved Soviets and United States sort of battling it out. And then lastly, at the end of class, when we finished the lecture, we finished the reading and the questions and writing the thesis, any leftover time will be based on this question. It'll be like, how did Kennedy deal with the threat of expanding communism from the Soviet Union and Cuba, and how successful was he in handling national and international crises? And so this will be able to, this question, we picked this because it allows us and the students to sort of address all parts of the lesson plan that we had up to this point, because they can talk about the space race, they can talk about the Bay of Pigs, they can talk about Vietnam, they can bring up any knowledge that they've taken in this lesson or before and apply it to this. And we'll sort of have a similar group discussion as we did after the lecture. And this is also the time where if students are having problems understanding the material, then I personally or students who are near them can help them out and help explain some of the concepts that they might be lacking in. So for the last part of this video, I'd like to go over specifically my advice for students next year who may be doing the same project, not necessarily the same topic, but the same process overall. So first, I'd like to say you should pick a primary source first to base your lesson plan around, rather than trying to find a source that fits perfectly into your lesson. We sort of learned this the hard way, where we kind of made a lesson that we felt really good about, but then when we went back and we were trying to like sort of finish it off and find a good document, there was nothing that really fit it quite right. Like nothing seemed to fit perfectly, and I feel like if what we ended up doing was we had to go back and we had to base some of our earlier lesson plans and adapt it based on our document. So I felt like if we chose the document first and then did the rest of our lesson plan, it would have saved a lot of time and would have been a lot less stressful at the last second. Speaking of which, 2, spend your time wisely. You're given multiple days for a reason, and so if you spend your first 1 or 2 or 3 days not doing what you're supposed to, sort of just goofing around, you will regret it. I know I worked on it for the last 2 days, but even spending 1 day goofing off is enough to make it crunch time. 3, I think this one is possibly the most important, is to pick a topic that you're interested in, because it makes the whole lesson plan more enjoyable. So I specifically chose this lesson plan because I could involve the space race, which is something I'm always been interested in, and I feel like if I had chosen something different, I wouldn't have been able to be as productive or as interested or involved with creating this project. So yeah, that's about it. Thanks.